Hello and welcome to another in the series of conversations with UCT alumni. Our guest today is the distinguished jurist and wonderful human being, Judge Albie Sachs. Albie, your parents both came to South Africa to escape anti-Semitic persecution in Lithuania. Both activists, both members of the Communist Party. Your mom worked as a secretary for Moses Kotane. I mean, it's extraordinary to think about a white woman working as a secretary for a black man in South Africa in the 1930s. There really was never any chance that you wouldn't turn out to be an activist, was there?
You're completely wrong. I mean, the facts are right. As a young, growing up guy, I was very proud of my parents, but I hated them assuming I'd follow in their footsteps. I wanted to be me. And right up to my second year at University of Cape Town, I was not a political activist. I loved poetry. I was very interested in the rag, intervarsity. I still remember singing the songs. We would have training, and you had to attend, I think, 5 to get a ticket to attend the intervarsity. That's between UCT and Stellenbosch. That was the focus of my life then. And we'd have the cheerleader, and it would be Yay Sachs. We'd also have Yay Sachs. Smoke Max, a cigarette then. Brook Lax, Solly Sachs, Solly. That was my dad. When I'm shouting Solly Sachs, he was a trade union leader, the Garment Workers Union in Johannesburg. So in that sense, I was apolitical, non-political, and totally immersed in mountain climbing. I played a bit of cricket and did quite well in my subjects at UCT. The one subject I liked very much was English. We had a special course, English for law students. And I think I enjoyed that more than law for law students in the first year. And it was quite an interesting year for me because I wanted to understand this thing, modern art. Why do people make such a fuss about it? Picasso, funny words, impressionists, cubists. There must be something. I couldn't see it. I looked at the book and it just didn't make any sense. And I used to hitchhike from UCT down on Friday afternoons to Cape Town. And there was the ID booksellers, had beautiful art books. Strange ID booksellers in Grootkerkgebou. That's where the Nazis used to hang out. I like to think the owners at the time I went there were anti-fascist. I'm not sure about that. But they had beautiful art books. And I'd sit there and I'd turn over the pages and read. And then I'd come back the next week. They let me do this. And after 4 or 5 weeks, I could tell the difference between the Impressionists and the Fauvists and the Cubists and the Surrealists. And I felt I'd gained something. My head was into those areas. Music. My mother's second husband was an Englishman in the Royal Marines. They met at the People's Club during World War II. The officers would go to Constantia, meet the ladies, and the ratings and the musicians would go to the People's Club. Fell in love with my mom, Ray. They married, and he played the French horn in the Cape Town Symphony Orchestra. The sound was all, I couldn't make head or tail of classical music. So I decided now I've got to listen to music, get into that. And just on holiday one year in Joburg, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and the cover, the sleeve spoke about fate knocking at the door, and all I could hear, blah, blah, blah. And I listened again, blah, 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 and I listened again, da 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 da. Da 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 da, da 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 da. When I went to jail, I slammed the door and I said da 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 da. Beethoven came in with me. So in a sense, those were years when my imagination was wandering. I loved words and what you could do with words. Funnily enough, I don't think it was the prospect of this interview. I remembered a thing called a triolet, a very refined form of verse in English. It was like A, B, A, B, 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 something like that. And it was an absolutely empty piece of verse, not about passion, not about revolution, not about change, not about resistance. And it went, I only kissed her on the hand. Is that why Lisette dislikes me? I really cannot understand. I only kissed her on the hand. Perhaps I deserved a reprimand. But another thought now strikes me. I only kissed her on the hand. Is that why Lisette dislikes me? Now it's the least, passionate, romantic.
We're talking about 70 years ago, and that's what comes to mind.
And it popped back into my head. But that pleasure of words, the power of language, the richness of language, the means of communication, the fun, the joy, the surprise you could get just from language. That was something that captured me. I was the editor of the Sachs School magazine, and we used to swap magazines with other schools, and we were so angry with bishops. They beat us at everything, and they'd have a picture of the cricket team won all their games, and there they are. And their rugby team won all their games. I think even in boxing, they beat us even in boxing. They got good results. We were so angry with them. But there was one thing we beat them at, culture. In that sense, culture was a weapon of struggle in terms of our esteem fighting against bishops. And our school magazine had limericks, poetry, photographs, short stories, and it was a great joy and pleasure for me to be involved and engaged in that activity. As I said before, not political.
But that love of language, Albie, explains why the books that you've written have won awards, because that love of language has informed not only the non-fiction books that you've written, but also the judgments that you authored while at the Concourt. There is a particular literary joy about reading them, apart from the very precise jurisprudential setting out of the issues. I mean, let's just remind people watching, in case they knew, and tell them if they didn't, that you were only 15 when you went to university. So this time of exploration of music and culture, whereas a 16 and a 17-year-old. But, I mean, given the fact that in 1952, I think it was, that you took some other white students and sat in chairs at a post office, which were historically reserved for black people, means there was a point at which the focus, if not shifted, at least you gained an alternate focus. What were the origins of that?
It was more than a focus shifting. It was a somersault. It was strangely, maybe not so strangely, it was going to a lecture by Eskrige, the Afrikaans poet. And when my mom left my dad and we came to live in Cape Town, I was a little picky. I don't have memories of being born, or clearly not being born, growing up in tiny infancy in Joburg. And we stayed in a bungalow owned by Eskrige. He was then married to Lydia Lindequee, the actress, on 4th Beach in Clifton. We stayed in the basement. So I'd heard of him, and people would say he's a poet. I couldn't understand, what's a poet? I can understand a train driver or a pilot, or even a shopkeeper. What's a poet? He uses words, language. So I just knew a poet. There was something lofty about being a poet, but something a little bit mysterious and strange. So I go to the lecture, and it was on a Spanish poet called Lorca. I didn't even know they had poets in Spain, bullfighters. That was my knowledge of Spain. And Ace had been in Spain during the latter portion of the Spanish Civil War, the late 1930s, when the fascists took over, destroyed the Republican government. And they executed Federico Lorca, playwright, poet, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And Ace walked up and down, up and down, up and down, speaking English and Spanish and a bit of Afrikaans and a bit of French. And it was mesmerizing. And he recited a poem by Pablo Neruda from Chile. Poets in Chile, Latin America, we had crocodiles, they had alligators. We had Kilimanjaro, they had the Andes. And the poem was about the moment that Lorca was killed with the firing squad. A los 5 de la tarde. A los 5 de la tarde, at 5 in the afternoon. He walked up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And 6 months later, I was going to jail. And there were a few in-between steps, quite important steps. But what Ace Kreger's discussion of poetry did for me was he linked up the inwardness, the soulfulness, the dreaming of some wonderful imaginary world that you could aspire to and think about and immerse yourself in with public events. It stopped being a purely personal, private poetry in your head and in your heart, and it's a poetry that linked you up with the passions of the world. And people asked me afterwards when I spoke about culture and the importance of culture, culture in struggle and so on, Albie, why did you bring culture into politics? And I said it was the other way around. It was culture that got me into politics in the first place, that imagination, the romanticism in the nice sense of the word, the passion, the fervor, and also the openness of it. Connected now. And it clearly connected with the world I've grown up in. My parents imagining revolution, transformation, change, fighting the injustices of racism in South Africa, fighting for the workers. My dad organized the Garment Workers Union. And it all connected up. But I wasn't following their footsteps. I was on my own journey, but imbued with their ideas. Not long after the Ace Kreger lectures, it's the 6th of April, 1952.
Back day,
to the modern generation, and I love asking audiences, can you remember where you were on the 6th of April, 1952? And the only time a lot of hands went up was at a literary festival in Hermanus. It's full of oldies like me. And I said, I remember it very well. It's the tercentenary of Jan van Riebeeck landing in Cape Town, planting the flag. And we were told at school that's when South African history started. And it was only a few years after the Afrikaner Nationalist Party had come into power with that word apartheid, which was still new. And they were celebrating planes flying overhead, armored cars through the streets, and maybe 200 of us in the Salt River Town Hall, 190 black, maybe 10 white, and we singing. And the songs were sad. My boye, my boye, my boye, Africa. My boye, come back, Africa. And then a song sung to this day, Sen Zenina, Sen Zenina, Sen Zenina, Sen Zenina. And I'm trying to go along with the words, but suddenly it's Dr. Maroka, Dr. Dado, J.B. Marks, Katani Lebapapi, volunteers obey the orders, be ready for the action now, volunteers obey, and they're calling for volunteers. And I say to my friend Wolfie Kodish, I want to join. He says, you can't. Why? You're white. But we're fighting racism. It's a black struggle led by black people, but if you're serious, I'll put your name forward. And my name went up to the headquarters in Johannesburg, And December, I've finished now my second year exams. I'm a 17-year-old law student, and I'm leading, there's a group of 4 of us sitting on a bench in the General Post Office, mock non-whites only. There was a group of whites in Johannesburg, led by Patrick Duncan, had joined in the Defiance campaign, and now there's a small group in Cape Town. And people sometimes ask the question, did apartheid bring anything good to South Africa? And I say it only brought one good thing to South Africa, anti-apartheid. If it hadn't been for apartheid, I would never have met or been connected with Nelson Mandela. So I was volunteer number 8,432 or something. He was volunteer number 1. Not a well-known person. And I think I noted he was a lawyer, very meaningful, a lawyer now, who'd managed to open a practice with his partner Oliver Tambo. They couldn't vote. They had to carry a pass. They couldn't live where they wanted. They couldn't even open the office. They could make some money, and he's willing to sacrifice all that for the rights of his people. And I feel very proud to be part of that campaign. There was an ironical ending, not ending, but a moment when, so I've been locked up. And you join the struggle and you're imagining all the time you're going to be locked up. And you read about people all over the world in different struggles, they're locked up, and now I'm locked up. And some people remember their first kiss. I remember the first time I went to jail. It was like a first for me. And come into the magistrate's court. The magistrate looks and he sees, oh, a 17-year-old juvenile. So now I'm the leader of the group, right on, thumbs up, salute. And he said, are any of your parents in court? My mother stands up. He said, I'm sending you home to your mother. It's a bit of a come down for me. But it's my introduction then to active politics and fitting in the Defiance with my end-of-year exams, combining this double life of a student at UCT. UCT was quite lively in terms of politics. There
were no black students, not under
there were black students
admitted under special exemptions.
Yes,
yeah.
I think a 10% quota, and that gave rise to the first public speech that I gave. It was in what was then Jamison Hall, and it could have been 1,000 students. And the issue is whether the black students should be able to play tennis and swim and join the cricket team and the rugby team. Social equality. And Zach de Beer, whom I met years afterwards, said, it was like here we are beneath Table Mountain, this beautiful setting, and it's wonderful that all the students can sit together in the same classrooms and get education together. But we can't have black students in the swimming pools, the tennis courts, and so on. Integration academically, social activities, segregation, fighting very hard. And I walk up there and I give what I think is a fiery, passionate speech saying, we're all equal and we have to have the right to equality in every area. And I'm pouring out my heart. And I come and I sit down with the guy next to me, Izzy Podolsky was his name. Oh, that's just what we wanted, a nice, quiet speech. It shows how little you see inside yourself. And we lost that battle. And I remember one of the students from the coloured community, standing up and saying, we're not going to use the swimming pools and the tennis courts because we don't want to give the regime a stick to beat us with, but we want the principle, we want the right. It was emotional and very, very moving. And we lost that battle. But it was not like, it was something like 600 to 400 at that stage. So that's another first for me, standing up in the microphone.
In 1955, as a 20-year-old, you were at Kliptown for the Congress of the People and the bringing into life existence of the Freedom Charter. That must have been an extraordinary experience for a 20-year-old white boy.
Well, for
anybody.
No, I was 20 years old. I was white and a boy, okay. It was an extraordinary experience for everyone who was there. Everyone. We'd been denouncing, Makapela Mapasi, down with the passes. My boy, Africa, come back. Now we were expressing the vision of the future. It was so affirmative. There was a sense of wonder and of occasion. It wasn't a lawyer's gathering to draft a document. The text had already been agreed upon through lots and lots of committees. It was an affirmation, and the affirmation was so important. It was out in the open. It wasn't behind closed doors. It was mostly poor people, the majority of South Africa, and it happened to be black, white, and brown, men and women, young and old, like the nation, the sense of the nation, sitting there, maybe 2,200, 300 there, and on the second day, the police come in, and we're surrounded by police on horseback, and then the paramilitary marching down the middle with their Sten guns. If one stone had been thrown, we wouldn't speak about Sharpeville, we'd speak about Soweto. But we stood up and we sang beautiful songs. The sense of discipline, of unity, and of music being part and parcel of who we were, and of resistance, and of our togetherness was just immense. You saw the two South Africas there, what we called the people, us, the masses, and the state, the repressive. Two worlds clashing, if you like, in one. And the treason trial followed on that. It dragged on for years. It became ludicrous to say, even in apartheid South Africa, that to demand equality, this was the argument, given the fact that only whites have the vote, you can only achieve equality through violence. That's treason. Even in South Africa, that was too much for the judges. And there were ludicrous moments because they seized all the documents they could find, handed them in the treason trial, and amongst the documents was one that said soup with meat, and another said soup without meat. And that became one of the jokes, of these dangerous revolutionaries with their slogan, soup with meat and soup without meat. The lawyers on trial defended themselves at a certain stage. They were so bored. And that was when one of the lawyers stood out physically because he was tall, but through his eloquence and focus, and that was Nelson Mandela. And that was the moment when Nelson Mandela became Nelson Mandela, part of the younger emerging generation, standing out through the sharpness of mind, through the clarity of thought, through the composure and a kind of serenity that comes from a coherent position, not blustering, not ranting, but expressing what people were feeling and living and experiencing, and their parents and grandparents experience all the time, with a fineness and a sense of honor and dignity that was very, very profound. So for me, being in a movement like that, I felt so honored to be part and parcel of it. And years later, when a film was made of my life and we had a wonderful launch at the Market Theatre in Johannesburg, I was interviewed and somebody spoke about the sacrifices you made, and I said, I don't feel I sacrificed. In fact, I feel I'm probably the most privileged human being on earth. And that's quite a big claim to make.
That's a huge claim to make, given the fact that you lost your right arm and your left eye.
Yes, but John, I was born with a white skin. That's a privilege that came through the grotesque system here. But I had the privilege of belonging to a freedom struggle and being embraced and accepted. Every twice a year when I was studying at UCT, I'd visit Johannesburg and I would drop in at the office of Mandela and Tambo just to pay my respects. And they always, Ruth Mompati would get a cup of tea for me, and it would be a minute either with Mandela or with Tambo. They were very, very busy. How's the struggle in Cape Town? You always say the struggle's good in Cape Town. Well, you see Comrade Albie, you know, we're very busy now, but thank you for coming. But for me, it was, I felt so embraced and so welcomed. And it gave so much meaning. Now I'm studying law, and it's not just for another job, it's to use what I learned in campaigning with my fellow South Africans and enlarging myself as a human being and learning to walk and move in a different way, getting out of my tight white skin and to sing in public and huge cultural transformation for me. Learning to dance.
Were you good at it?
I was actually, as it happened. Maybe because I didn't go. My schoolboy friends would go to Arthur Murray, left, right, left. And we didn't have the money, it was my interest. But we'd have our drill and everybody would be bumping everybody and you'd pick up the rhythm, and I actually became... So it was more than just learning slogans and learning songs. It was learning to inhabit your body and find your place in the country in a different way, a very profound cultural thing. Then if I can just finish the privilege aspect, the privilege afterwards, a lawyer helping to write your country's constitution. Wow, you know, it's astonishing. And then sitting on the court that's defending that constitution. And if that's not enough, helping with the design of the building and the place and the space and the ambience, you know, it's privilege after privilege after privilege that happens to have maybe that's the wrong person in the right place or the right person in the wrong place at the right time. So for me, the sacrifice would have been just to follow the mapped out road for white professionals, maybe doing a little bit of good here and there along the way. Instead, the journey was this intense one of very rich, meaningful life where there's that integration of what you believe in, what your heart wants, but also the humanity of the people you're working with, the fun, the laughter. Sometimes I get very dismayed by people in what's now called the human rights world. They have long faces, as if the sorrows of the world are not heavy enough as they are, and you add to them with a long face. And in that sense, we had a lot of pain, a lot of intense suffering in our struggle, but also a lot of energy and laughter and mischief and humanity and love, very, very rich emotions. And all of that made for an intensely rich life that took me all over the world, involved me in all sorts of different experiences in different countries, but very, very, very rich. There were lots of extremely painful moments in the struggle, not painful like the time I was interrogated. That was awful. The worst moment of my life was not when I was blown up. It was when I collapsed on the floor with a kind of torture by sleep deprivation, with Roller Swanepoel, bang in the club, blah, 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 and then quiet. 20 minutes quiet and 10 minutes shouting and banging. A technique I believe they learned from the French in Algeria, French secret police. And I collapsed the next morning on the floor, and they pour water on me and pried my eyes open. That was the worst moment in my life. But that's the pain you get from the oppression, which so many of our people suffered far worse than I did. The pain when you see your own comrades misbehaving. I'm in West African country, and a senior ANC person is there, and there's a young woman wants to study in Sorbonne, and she knew what she was doing, and I cried inside. She had to sleep with this guy to get ahead. We're fighting for freedom, we're fighting for dignity, we're fighting for rights, and he's using that position. There are other examples. I'd often say to myself, the whole is better than the parts. And the parts were these people in positions of authority, abusing their positions. The whole was people like Oliver Tambo. He was quite extraordinary. More different from me, you couldn't get. I'm in a very secular upbringing, cosmopolitan Cape Town, he deep rural. He's deeply religious, due to be ordained as an Anglican minister. I'm from a totally different cultural background. We loved each other. When he had to afterwards prepare a speech for the World Conference on Religion, he came to me to help him write that speech, knowing I'm secular, because we just agreed. He expressed it in a certain format, a vocabulary, if you like, of religion. I would express it in another way. And Joe Slovo, and there were so many others, people I met. There was a wonderful student in Maputo, Ben Makwena, well-known, not well-known, Ruth First, people of dedication and intellect and vitality, and they were the leaders of the struggle, and the others were sadly that they were there, that they were able to do the things that they did, but never the main thrust of what we did.
And that brings us to the end of part one of this Conversations with Alumni, chat with Albie Sachs, and we will be back with another.